Any plans for this evening? Perhaps a game night?
It's game over, man. It's game over.
Shut up. Play the game. Play it from your heart.
26 years ago, we started playing a little game. Now, we're all gonna sit down. We're gonna finish it.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
And here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dice Camera Action, a mashup podcast about board games and movies. I'm your co-host, Jason Tripp, and I'm heartbroken that I've never attended a Gencon experience, but we're going to hear all about that today. We got a special episode lined up because regular co-host Matt Cousineau is here with us, and we have a special guest with us today, Andrew Stiles, who is the co-host of the board gaming podcast Tabletop Submarine podcast and game designer. So I'm in the presence of not one, but two game designers today. He's the designer of Wine Cellar by 25th Century Games, which, congratulations, Andrew. I hear it recently funded on Kickstarter by 600% with over 1,400 backers. Fantastic news. So, Matt, great to be with you as always. And Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, this is exciting.
It's our pleasure. This is great. And I'm just going to kind of sit back and play kind of host/interviewer today because we're going to have a special Gen Con episode. You both were two of 70,000 plus people that just attended Gen Con in Indianapolis. And I have never attended Gen Con. I've been to some other cons closer to home. I will one day. Matt will drag me there one of these years, I'm sure. Definitely. But I thought we'd have an episode. We devote an entire episode to the Gen Con experience. So I don't know how we're going to do this, but I'm just going to open it up. And you both were there. Matt, it was your first Gen Con, right?
That's right, yeah.
Andrew, are you a regular? You've been there many times? How many times have you been to Gen Con?
This would have been my fifth. Yeah, this is my fifth episode.
Okay, so interesting. So we'll get the veteran perspective. You can kind of compare and contrast your experience this year. Matt has nothing to compare this year's to, but it'd be nice to hear someone who's sort of a first-time attendee. So maybe, Andrew, let me start with you. How did this year's Gen Con, having been there 5 times, how did it maybe compare and contrast to Gen Cons previously for you?
So I went once before the pandemic. And it was crazy. I mean, really and truly, it was an experience that I was so happy that I had, but I was not anxious to go back again. It was overwhelming in like a good way, but also a little scary. And as a person who wasn't in the industry yet, it was just this deluge of everything, right? I literally got swept into crowds dragging me along aisles, and you had to like swim against the tide to get out of it into a different aisle. Like it wasn't a casual experience. It was very much a, how do I put it, like a little bit of a junkies kind of situation, right? Like where everybody feels like they have to see the newest thing and they're in a rush to see it. It's not just people casually strolling down an aisle and window browsing. But once the pandemic hit, it definitely obviously cleaned out a lot of that, and it got down to much, much lower numbers and, you know, social distancing and all those things. And so I went during that time to start being in the industry. And that was really weird, but in some ways better for me personally, because it took some of that intimidation out of it. It became something where like I was there for business and I was doing business, but I was also observing in a more controlled environment. I think now it's back to where it used to be, but they've learned how to do things better from the pandemic so that now it doesn't feel as crowded as it did pre-pandemic, but still has that business and that rush and that fun anticipation without the crush of the crowds bumping and elbowing you to get stuff.
Before we get too far down the tracks in this conversation, I'm assuming most of our listeners have either attended Gen Con or are familiar, but there might be some who aren't familiar. So a little bit of the history of Gen Con. Gen Con is the largest tabletop convention in North America by attendance and numbers of events. I think it was inaugurated in 1968. And for a season, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, it was in Wisconsin. And you're here you're in Wisconsin right now as we speak, which is kind of interesting. Convention was moved around to various locations in Wisconsin during the 70s into the 80s, and then in 85, I believe, it made Indianapolis called Gencon home, and it's been held there ever since. And so this year was the largest attendance at a Gencon. Anywhere from 70, I guess, to 80,000 people. So, Matt, were you overwhelmed walking in? I mean, you obviously have some expectations about what you're going to experience at a Gen Con. How did your experience relate to what you thought it would be going into the event?
Yeah, it was wild. It's definitely one of the biggest crowds I've ever been in. I've been to like a football stadium for an outdoor hockey game actually in Ann Arbor, Michigan at the Big House. So that was probably the biggest crowd I've ever been in. That was 100,000 plus. But Gen Con was like a close second, and honestly felt like more of a crowd because we're indoors and in hallways and in tighter quarters and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was crazy. I've never been in such an environment, and it was cool to just be amongst my people. So it was really like, you use the words already, Andrew, overwhelming in a good way, I think, for me, because even though, it felt tight at times, and especially when you're like waiting to get into the vendor hall in the morning and you're shoulder to shoulder and you get the scurrying of the nerds into the vendor hall and everybody's kind of like going to their specific booth trying to get that game that they've been hoping to get at Gen Con. Like, that's just a really cool thing to be a part of, the energy that everybody's kind of like part of. So it was a blast. I had a ton of fun. I was there partially for on the business side of things, promoting Kyperium. We had a Dragon Egg Games, which is a co-publisher that I work with, had a booth, and then we split the time between the 3-4 designers that had co-published games with Dragon Egg Games. So I was at the booth for, I want to say, like 3/4 of the time, and then I had a good amount of time to walk around and just take it in, do some shopping, and enjoy myself as well. So I got to enjoy both sides of it, promoting Kyperium, selling games, just talking to people in that capacity, and then also just enjoying myself as like a fan of the hobby.
Sure. So I want to ask you both, because you're both kind of wearing multiple hats as you go to a Gen Con. You're there as, first and foremost, you're lovers of the hobby, but you're both game designers. So you're there as vendors. You're promoting your games. So what percentage of the time, you said about 3/4 of the time you were promoting Kyperium? Andrew, I guess the same for you. Most of your time was spent just promoting Wine Cellar. And just how was that experience from the vendor perspective at Gen Con this year? Maybe Andrew, will start with you.
So yeah, I would say about 10% of my time was promoting Wine Cellar. I was doing private play tests with people, stuff like that. But the other, I would say 75% of my time was pitching to publishers. It's one of the few conventions in the country where almost every publisher is there. So for local conventions, you can do some of the smaller publishers. For the medium conventions like Origins and PAX Unplugged, you can get quite a bit of the publishers there. But Gen Con is one of the few that has almost every publisher there. So it's one of the few times you can get FaceTime and a time to show off my game in person to specific publishers that are the best possible fits for those games.
And so how many publishers did you have a chance to chat with, rub shoulders with? Whether you probably had your like wish list of, I gotta seek out this publisher or that publisher. Were you able to talk to as many people as you wanted to? Or
I could never talk to enough people, but yes, I mean, I had my 10 pitches with 10 publishers, and I did all those. And then, of course, I went around and shook hands and introduced myself in person to a bunch of publishers that I was looking to get to know better and make more connections at. So even if I wasn't working, I was always networking.
Nice. Fantastic. And how about you, Matt? I mean, your game has been published, but you spent quite a bit of your time just promoting the game. How was that experience, and what was the feedback, maybe for both of you, for Kyperium and Wine Cellar?
Yeah, really good. We, like as I said, we had a booth. So for most of the weekend, I was standing at the booth, had my game on display. just kind of greeting people, inviting people into the booth. A good handful of people sat down and demoed Kyperium. Most of those people ended up buying, so that's always a good feeling. To be honest, this is the first time I've gone to like any convention of note. I've been to like some really small events locally and that kind of thing, but nothing that I would actually call like a legit board game convention promoting the game. We did do Breakout Con in Toronto a few years ago, but that was during the Kickstarter, so we didn't actually have games to sell. So all that to say, this was the first time that I went to a convention, had a booth, had a huge stack of games ready and available to sell. So that was a really neat feeling to just be in that position, to just be like, here's the game, here's the price, what do you want to know about it, let's sit down and demo. Kind of perfected the demoing of the game as well, just through repetition. I'd never demoed the game so many times in such a short period of time, so kind of got it down to a science where like I set up the board just so, I set up people's hands just so they could get a really good snapshot of what the game is in like a 10-15 minute period. Because typically if I have somebody sit down for 10-15 minutes and start at the beginning of the game, they haven't had a chance to ramp up yet. They haven't had a chance to start building their engine and build their board and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was really interesting to kind of perfect the demo as well, which was kind of a fun experience. And yeah, I had a blast. It was just so cool to see people sit down and play the game and buy it. One of the best feelings too was some like people just walking up to the booth and going, "1 Kyperium, please." And then it's like, "Oh, okay, here you go." And then it's like, "How do you? Where do you? What? Why?
Yeah.
Why? Who, why? Who? How?" So a good handful of people just had like subscribed to the BGG. I'm forgetting what it's called, but the BGG Gencon games list or whatever. So there was like over 500 games on there, and you could subscribe on BGG, and every time a publisher added a game to that list, you would get a notification, check it out. So I was doing that. Nice. And then a good hand, like I want to say 4 or 5 people came up, had never heard of the game, never saw the Kickstarter, hadn't demoed the game. They just like came up and said, "Oh yeah, I saw it on the beach," and then like the description sounded cool, the art looks good, so yeah, we want to check it. And they just bought the game, so that was a really cool feeling.
Save you having to demo it to them.
Yeah, always awesome when somebody sits down, knows nothing about the game, and you're like, "This is Kyperium," and then you play with them for 10 minutes, and they're like, "I'm buying this. Like, give me a copy." That's amazing too. And then like the third kind of thing about it that about having a booth and all that was a lot of people who were fans of the game already would come up and be like, "Hey, I was a backer and I love the game and just wanted to introduce myself and shake your hand," and like you have fans all of a sudden. It's such a weird thing. But it's just really humbling and really, really neat feeling. So, that side of things was a total blast, and I just had so much fun, and I can't wait to do it again at another convention and have the opportunity to show off the game and get some more exposure.
Amazing. So, Andrew, I want to talk to you a little bit about your game and your design experience, because you were there sort of demoing and playtesting your game, and it's kind of neat when real-life experiences and passions bleed into the hobby. And you were telling me a little bit that you used to be a sommelier, and now here you are designing a wine-themed game, Wine Cellar. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how your life passion experience sort of led to designing that game and your experiences with that game at Gencon.
Well, yeah, I think it starts with the game design journey, right? Like once you decide that you are going to take a chance at that, you do all the research, stuff like that. And kind of like what they tell writers, write what you know. For me, it was like design what you know. And one of my previous lives, I was a sommelier. So I looked at the games that have wine in them, Viticulture and Vinos, and a couple other not so great wine games out there like Wine Handler and stuff like that. But I thought there's a niche here of people who are passionate about wine that have no idea that board games really exist. And if they do, they look at these games that intimidate them, right? You look at a game like Viticulture, and if you are a casual person who likes wine a lot, that's not a game you're going to try to learn how to play. Just, it's too much. So I thought, let me make a quick 15 to 20-minute card game that showcases wine in a interesting way to people who know wine, it'll be more of a draw to them to this game than that game, right? So trying to take some of that intimidation out of it. Also, I think one of the things that's really cool about wine is how wine ages. Most people don't know the magical version of how wine can get better or worse as it sits in a cellar waiting for it to be opened. And so in this game, each card is a timeline, essentially. Each card is a bottle of wine with a timeline on it with a maximum score for if you drink it at the right time. And your job is to use those bottles to acquire other bottles and then put those in your cellar and then try to build the best possible timeline. You also have a client card, which they have preferences. So maybe they like sparklings, they like rosé, or they like whites, or they like reds. So you get extra points for those things, and they prefer specific countries. So maybe this client likes French wine and likes maybe Spanish wine or something like that. And so you get bonus points for acquiring bottles that match those things. And that's essentially the game. It's a blind bidding process. So everybody puts a card face down, flips it over when everybody's ready, and then whoever is highest gets to draft first from the prize cards in the center, and those become the bottles in your cellar. It's the kind of game that you can demo in 3 minutes. People can play in 5. It's a perfect demo level game, and demoing is a really good skill, Matt. So good for picking up on that. That's a really cool thing. But yeah, that's how I got started in this hobby, and it's the first of 6 signed games. So I'm looking forward to seeing all the other ones come down the line at some point. But this process is a 2 to 3 year process from the day it gets signed. It's still maybe a year and a half at the earliest from seeing the light of day. So we got through the Kickstarter, and that's great. But I still only have my single one pre-production copy. It hasn't gone on production line yet, so it hasn't been mass produced. It's not available yet for people to just buy straight up like Hyperion, which is so much cooler. So next year's Gen Con will be my experience that Matt's going through. I'm looking forward to that.
Fantastic.
Very cool.
And who knows, maybe I'll be able to join Matt for that experience next year as well, and pick up my copy. So fantastic. Matt, remind me, we got to get Andrew back down the road. He did mention one of my favorite games, Viticulture. So we'll get you on for another episode, Andrew, and we'll
for sure.
We'll have a deeper wine conversation at that time. But I know some of our listeners, the $1 million question they want to know is, what were the hottest games? Aside from Hyperion and Wine Cellar, what are the hottest games at this year's Gen Con? So maybe a 2-part question. So both of you, what from your perspective were the hottest games that were flying off the shelves, people couldn't wait to get their hands on? And then what did you fill your shopping bags with? What did you bring home from Gen Con? So Matt, maybe start with you. What maybe 2 or 3 games that you felt were some of maybe the hottest ones at Gen Con, things that we can be watching out for as they maybe are just rolling off the shelves now, and maybe they'll hit the shelves soon in local retail stores.
Yeah, some of the hottest ones, I want to say Slay the Spire was a big one that a lot of people were talking about and lining up for. I don't know a ton about that game, but I know it was just recently released. I think maybe it was released at Gen Con specifically, and then will be available in retail after the fact. So that was a huge one. I know The Gang was kind of a sleeper hit. It was not, I don't know if anybody knows about The Gang. Well, I'll talk about it a little bit more in a few minutes, because it's going to be part of my kind of shout out section of the pod where we talk about some of the games that we've played. But The Gang was not something that was like hugely popular pre-Gen Con, but in the days leading up to it, I think a few content creators were pumping its tires and talking about it. And then I ended up in a 1 hour lineup to pick up that game on one of the days. So that game sold out every day and is a big hit. I don't think it's available quite yet in retail, but keep your eye out for The Gang. Really cool game. And then, let's see, what's another one that was really hot? Obviously, you've got the CCGs, so you've got the Lorcanas and the Magics, and right. Star Wars Unlimited had some like Gen Con exclusive packs that they were selling that was huge lineups for, and people were clamoring for that. So obviously that as well. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. What else was hot, Andrew, that you noticed?
The biggest one for me was Gnome Hollow by Ammon Anderson. That one.
Oh, yeah, of course.
He's a friend of mine, a really good designer. But that one sold out on day one in 4 hours, and then the Op did an amazing job, essentially reaching out to all their other partner retailers as well as some of their warehouses, and they brought more copies to sell more. So it was sold out on day one, but if you came on day 2 or day 3, there were more copies to get at that point. And I think they almost sold out of everything they brought in the second batch. So that was one of the biggest hits. I would also say Rock Hard 1977.
And the biggest presence, too.
Oh, yeah, it was amazing. They did such a great job marketing that game. They had
Gnome Hollow had...
Every year they do the balloon sculpture, right? And usually it's a dragon or something like that. And this year they did the Gnome Hollow gnomes. And then they did it in such a way that they were actually costumes. So people got inside the balloon sculptures and then did a little parade up and down the hallway. It was very cool. The Op really killed it with that.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really cool. And they even had like a part of the balloon sculpture was a little house, like a little gnome house that you could walk into. And they had like the game set up and like it looked like the gnomes were playing it. And yeah, it looked like a little gnome house all made of balloons. And it was completely adorable. And they did an amazing job with their presence at Gen Con. And yeah, you were going to mention Rock Hard 1977. Go ahead with that one, Andrew.
Yeah, that was Jackie Fox's game. So a real life rock star who is also a gamer decided to make a game about her life coming up as a rock star, which was killing it. The people were going bonkers. And I kept seeing it under people's hands as they were walking out. DeVere sold out of that one. And I think they did multiple days allocations. So just like they did with Cities. And City was another one. That's the Phil Walker Harding game. Who else was the other designer? It was Phil Walker Harding and Steve Finn. And that game I think it was sold out in the first 20 minutes of every day. So they had allocations for that day and it sold out immediately. So that was pretty awesome. The Galactic Cruise guys had a little presence there. They did a great job. Arcs from Leader Games was another one of the super hot ones. And that's one that I played recently that I really like too. But that one's a little more polarizing. People seem to either really like that one or really don't like it. But that was a very hot game at Gen Con as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have Arcs pre-ordered as well, so I'm excited. I'm excited for that to arrive. That's been buzzing on the internet for weeks and weeks now, and I sort of regret because I had pre-ordered prior to Gen Con. So when I went to Gen Con, I was just like, I'll just wait. But now I'm getting the FOMO and wish I had found a way to pick it up at Gen Con. But yeah, excited for that one too.
Arcs has been on the hotness list on BGG for weeks.
So one of the biggest ones for me was Windmill Valley.
A couple other ones, Andrew?
Garcia. Yeah, that was a really good one. It's one I had played and really, really enjoyed. Danny Garcia is an up-and-coming designer. He did Barcelona. I now own both copies of those. Been playing those a lot lately. And then the really cool new Calico adjacent game is Knitting Circle by Emily Vincent. That was also a very hot game. And I know a lot of people were drooling over Comic Hunters by Spin Master, and they had special promo cards, and each card is a comic book, and it's really cool that people were demoing the games and then getting a package of those little demo cards, and then obviously buying a copy of Comic Hunters directly after that. So those I think were the biggest ones that I can tell.
Nice. Okay, so what made it into your shopping bags? And maybe typically on the episode we talk about what have you been playing lately. So let's focus on games that you came home with from Gen Con, and what are the first one or a couple that have hit your tables since coming back, and what's your experience been with some of those new games? Matt, what'd you bring back, and what's hit the table at your place?
Yeah, I had a pretty good haul. I was excited to get home and break open all the games, and I want to say, let's see here, I have a picture in front of me here. It's about 10 games that I picked up that I was excited to bring home and play. I'll talk about a handful of them. I played just about all of these, except for Reef Project, which is a game about rebuilding the coral reef. It has some path building. I don't know a ton about the game, but what I have heard is that it's mid to heavy and it is super combo-tastic is what I hear about it. So
Nice.
that caught my attention, and it's like bright, and the colors of the coral reef and all of that is like a gorgeous looking game, and I'm super excited to get it to the table. So that's one I haven't played yet. And then I think I played just about every other game that I brought home. Yeah, because I have played. So I'll talk about the gang because that's one that I was super excited, and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get it. But I stood in line for an hour, and I have a funny story about that I'll get to with my last game, which you'll see how that works out. But yeah, so the gang is a follow-up to the Crew, the Deep Sea, the Crew Planet 9 and Deep Sea, I think they're called. So this is a follow-up to that. So it is a cooperative game where you're playing Texas Hold'em poker. And it is really fascinating and really fun. And the description of it, I always find undersells the fun of it. But I'll spend a little bit more time on this one because it's especially fun and interesting. But so basically, it's Texas Hold'em poker cooperative. So instead of trying to have a poker face and not tell any of the people at the table what your cards are, you're trying to do exactly the opposite of that. You're not allowed to talk about your cards or the strength of your hand. But what happens is that after you get dealt your pocket cards, there's typically a round of betting in poker. Well, in this game, there are chips on the table, numbered 1 through 6, depending on the player count. And then everybody just reaches into the middle and grabs a chip that will represent the strength of their hand. So if you're playing a 4-player game, you're going to reach, if you have pocket aces or 2 face cards in your pocket, you're going to go after that 4. But then maybe somebody else thinks they have a stronger hand. So they're going to grab right from your area. They're going to grab that 4 from you. And then you kind of have this like, okay, look at each other. Okay, we both have strong hands. We know that. And then everybody else is grabbing their chips until everybody's sort of happy. And you just kind of, that's how you communicate, is just by grabbing chips and being like, no, I think I need that one. No, I think I need that one. And the chips are moving around the table until finally everybody says, okay, I guess this is it. I have the 3. I think I should have the 4, but I have the 3. And then we see the flop. So 3 cards come up. And then again, everybody looks at their hands. They make their best 5-card hand, as you do with Texas Hold'em. And everybody reaches for a chip. So maybe I had a 4 to start, but because I had pocket 8s, but now 3 overcards have come on the flop, and now I don't feel like I'm a 4 anymore. I'm probably a 3 or maybe even a 2, depending on how confident other people at the table are. So again, everybody's reaching for chips. Chips are moving around until everybody's happy. And then you do the same for the turn and the same for the river. And then after the river, everybody grabs their final chip, their red chip. And then once everybody's satisfied with that, the red chip is the only thing that matters. And one by one, starting with the weakest or who we think has the weakest hand, you reveal your hands and hope to have them in order. And if we do have them exactly in order, we get to unlock a vault. And if you unlock 3 vaults, you win the game. If you do not get it right, you set off an alarm. And if you set off 3 alarms, you lose the game. So that is the gang in a nutshell. And it just creates these super exciting moments. And it's especially fun if you're playing with a table full of people that really understand Texas Hold'em poker, because you look at the chip. People keep those chips in front of them, right? So after the pocket, the flop, et cetera, by the end of it, you'll have 4 chips in front of you. And that kind of tells a story of your hand, right? What the strength that you thought your hand was at, pre-flop or pre-flop, and then et cetera. The second chip, the third chip, the fourth chip will tell a story of how good your hand is. And so you look around the table and you're like, oh, that person hit something on the flop. And then that person hit something on the turn because they got stronger. And so you're really kind of puzzled out by looking at everybody's chips and not talking specifically about anything in our hands. And so, sometimes, like last night, I actually played the game with a friend and we were fighting over that one chip because I had an 8-4 offsuit. for my pocket. So I grabbed the one, and then my friend Dawn, she grabbed it from me, and I'm like, no, I have the one. Like, I have almost the weakest hand in poker. And then she grabbed it back and forth. Turns out we both had 8-4 offsuit. We had the exact same pocket, and that's why we were fighting over the chip. So it just creates a lot of really fun moments.
What happens in that case if two people have the exact same hand?
Then, whatever the
okay.
order is between those two people, ties are friendly.
Okay.
It's fine. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. So, final little story about the gang, and I'll keep it shorter for the following games. But at Gencon, the night that I bought it, I was so excited to play. I sat down with my buddies and some of the other publishers from Dragon Egg Games, and we played a 6-player game of the gang. And the more people you have, the harder it gets, right? And so we were 6 people, and one of the folks at the table didn't even know how to play poker. So we just kind of had to give him the little cheater card and do your best, and it's fine. We'll have fun. And the very first hand of the very first game of the gang, we kind of do the poker thing, and the chips are going around and whatever. And then we get to the red chips, and we're like, okay, let's see it. And then the person who had the one had like 8 high as their card, and the next person had like 10 high, and the next person had a jack high, and the next person had an ace high, and the next person had 2 pairs, the next person had 3. Like, we had nailed it, and all of the like margins between the strength of the hands were so small, we couldn't believe it, right? So everybody stood up and cheered and high fives. Like, if a game can create a moment like that is a hit. So yeah, huge props to the gang, and they did an incredible job with that game. It's
just a simple concept, 5-6 so much fun. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay,
cool.
So I'll move on, and I'll try to keep it shorter. That was just a really exciting one. We played. I bought Courtesans, which is a really cool game. Super simple game with a decent amount of take that and messing with your opponents. The thing I want to say about Courtesans, look it up. The cards are gorgeous. They're like long and thin, and they have like foil sections of it, and just absolutely gorgeous. It caught my attention, and for a fairly inexpensive little card game, brings quite a bit of tactical and strategy play from turn to turn. I picked up Landmarks, which is a pretty hot word game that kind of gives you codename vibes. But instead of having like a grid of cards where you're trying to make links, instead there's a map with hex tiles. The hex tiles, you can write words on it, like dry erase. And one person is trying to guide their partner or partners, depending on the mode that you're playing, through this map by giving them hints, writing a word on a tile, and then handing it to them. And then there are other words that have been previously put onto the map, and then that person has to like try to match based on the word hint that I gave them. So think code names. It looks like a Catan-ish map on the board with the hexes, and you're trying to guide them through. And then I, as the person who knows the map, I have a little card that only I can see that shows me which sections of the maps have the positive things we're going after, the path towards the exit where they're trying to get to, where the treasures are, try to avoid the traps, that kind of thing. So you're trying to guide them. There's a little bit of a geographical element to the game. Really cool game, super fun to play in bigger groups. I picked up Lure, which was an all-play popular release at Gen Con about fishing. Andrew's giving me the thumbs up. Have you played, Andrew?
Yeah, I demoed that one at Gen Con, and I had a great time with it, and I picked up a copy myself. That game is one of those simply elegant games that I really wish I'd designed.
Yeah, couldn't say it better. A little dice rolling game where you're trying. There's communal fish that everybody's trying to catch. There's certain criteria on each fish that you have to meet that have to do with the dice you roll, and then you kind of bid how many dice you're going to roll in your hand, and then you reveal simultaneously. Whoever reveals the least amount of dice gets to try to catch the fish first. So, but sometimes you need more dice to catch certain fish because the criteria is higher. So it's really about the minutia of the like small decisions of like, I could probably catch some with 3 dice, but if I go 4 dice, I'll for sure catch a bunch. But then somebody else will bid 3 dice and they'll catch them before me. There's really a lot of like like interesting decisions there with Lure. Again, an all play. Speaking of all play, I picked up Things and Rings, which I think has been covered pretty extensively, but there's like a Venn diagram with criteria for the 3 different sections. Another like word play, super fun game that's been a huge hit. Things in Rings by All Play. Cosmoctopus was not like a Gencon release, but I picked it up there. It's been around for about a year now, but a really cute cosmic octopus themed game that is like engine building and some pretty clever card play there too, which is really cool. One of the big ones I picked up that I was really excited about was Endeavor Deep Sea, which you can see over my shoulder here if you're watching the video. So they only had I want to say under 40 copies to sell at Gen Con. They were selling, because I know the first day I went and they said, oh, we're sold out. I said, oh, well, how many copies do you have? They said, oh, we had 12 today. I'm not sure how many we'll have tomorrow. So I want to say they were like for sure under 50 copies of Endeavor Deep Sea. And I managed to get my hands on that, which is exciting. It hasn't even fulfilled yet with backers. So I've played a few games of that, and it's a heavier game, so I won't go into the details. But it has a really neat map building mechanic where there's like these big tiles, and all of the actions and things that you can do on these tiles are just printed directly on the tile. And then there are level 1 tiles, which are surface tiles, level 2 tiles, which is like, let's say up to 200 meters underwater. And then the color of the water gets darker and darker and darker until you have the level 5 tiles. And the deeper you go with these tiles, the more exciting and the bigger splash you can make, pun intended, with your actions on those tiles. But it's a really neat system of like building out the map as you're playing the game, as you're discovering things in the deep sea. So that's a really neat. The last one I want to talk about is Sears Catalog. The reason I kept that one for last is because I have a really neat story about that one. So what happened was I was finished my shift of promoting Kyperium on Saturday at 2:00, and I had 4 hours to just wander the halls and pick up some games that I was thinking about buying and just kind of check out, take it all in. And I walked by the Bezier booth, and I noticed they had Sears Catalog, which is kind of on my short list of games to pick up. So I grab it, I throw it in my bag. I'm excited about checking it out later that day. It's a trick-taking, ladder-climbing, hand-shedding game that has some really neat mechanisms, and you really have to retrain your brain about how to play that kind of game when you sit down to play. It's really, really neat game, and it is spelled Sears Catalog, Seers. So basically the theme is that you're shopping for things to fend off werewolves. But like with most of these trick-taking games, the theme is take it or leave it. It's just mostly like neat, fun art. And if you want to dive into it, you can, but not really that critical to the playing of the game. So anyways, the story that I want to tell you about this game is that I threw it in my bag. I know my next thing is that at 3:00, the gang is going to be available for sale, and I'm going to go get in line for that. So it's like 2:15, and I noticed the line's like huge already. I'm like, oh man, I better get in line now. So I get in line. They give me a little ticket. I'm number 77. They have 100 games, so for sure I'm getting a game. I'm excited about that. So I'm standing in line, and I'm chit-chatting with this group of dudes who just happen to be, numbers 78, 79, whatever, right? And we're just chit-chatting and having a laugh. Super nice guys. And they're like, we probably have like a 40-minute wait here. Does anybody have like a little game we could play? And I go, well, I just picked up a game. I don't know anything about it yet. I just know it's like trick-taking or something. So they're like, sure, you grab it. So I open up my bag, I pull it out, and the 4 or 5 guys burst out into laughter. And I'm thinking, like, is there something in my teeth? Like, did I miss something? Turns out one of these 5 guys was the designer of Sears Catalog.
Taylor Rayner was
so standing there with Taylor Reiner, the designer. Yeah, super nice guy. So needless to say, we spent the next 45 minutes just talking about the industry and game design and chit-chatting about Kyperium and Sears Catalog. Took a great picture with Taylor and had a really nice time. And he asked me on that afternoon, he says, while we were in line, where's your booth? Because we had gotten to chat about Kyperium. And I said, "Oh, it's such and such a booth. If you have a chance, come and see us. Say hi tomorrow. I'll be there all day, whatever." Well, sure enough, he swings by the booth the next day and buys a game of Kyperium. It just goes to show like how great this industry is, and it's just like everybody's so humble and so nice and so welcoming, and it's just easy to talk to a game designer, that of a game that I bought with the intentions of like just a weird, fun moment there that will probably be the main memory that sticks with me about this Gen Con.
For those who don't
it's
know,
not just the games you have in your bag when you leave; it's the experiences, the friendships you create. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
For
Andrew.
sure.
For those that don't know Taylor Rayner, he has Taylor's Trick Taking Table. It's a video series on YouTube. Highly recommend checking him out. There's nobody else in this world like him. He is a weirdo in the best possible way, but he is very, very passionate about trick taking games. And he's a very talented designer who's been doing trick taking games for a while now. He has a bunch of games, but now he has gotten to the point now where publishers reach out to him to refine the trick-taking games they're going to publish. So he's going to have a bunch of developer credits and a bunch of games coming out, and he is really, really good at telling what's good and what's not. In fact, one of my pitches was through him. I wanted him to see my game, and I have a trick-taking game called Three Tricky Pigs. It's about three little pigs. And we played that game at Gen Con after hours so I could get his feedback, and then he could decipher that feedback down the line to other publishers, make it easier for me to get those pitches going forward to those publishers. So, I think we ended up playing 6 or 7 different trick-taking games that night after hours in the all-play room, which turns into like a little trick-taking haven every night after Gen Con. So if you are a trick-taking person and you go to Gen Con next year, make sure you hunt out the all-play room and get to play after hours there.
Man, I wish I knew that before. I definitely would have gone there. I'm a huge fan of trick-taking games.
Yeah, me as well. Always have been. Amazing. Well, Andrew, what about you? What did you go home with? What's hit your table since returning from Gen Con? And how have the experiences been with your new purchases?
Yeah, so normally we drive down to Gen Con from Chicago, right? So it's not that long a drive. It's totally acceptable, whatever, and that's fine.
Right.
This year, though, we did a combination where my wife flew in from a business trip and met me there. And because of that combination of things, it was one of those weird, wonky things where we had a lot of stuff in the car already, and we didn't have a lot of room for Gen Con purchases. So, with luggage and all the other things like that. So based on that, I tried to make sure I could only buy the things I could only get there. So my number one was Windmill Valley. This is a game that I demo played at Geekway to the West last year and fell in love with it. And I said, I need to have a copy of this. And they only had, like 300 copies or something like that at the booth. I made sure I grabbed my copy right away. That was the only purchase I ran in to grab. But I did pick up a copy of Forest Shuffle, the expansion for that one. I really like Forest Shuffle. That's a game that my wife and I have been playing a lot of, especially when we travel. It is the kind of game that, yes, you need a table to play it, but it's a deck of cards. So you can have it like a Ziploc bag and drop it in a purse or a bag or a backpack, and you can just take it everywhere. We went on a cruise through the Caribbean, and every day we were playing 2 or 3 versions of that while, either after dinner or before dinner, or waiting for drinks or having drinks or whatever, just kind of hanging out. And that game is really cool because it's just a deck of cards, but you're playing cards that are either trees or you're playing animals attached to that tree. So you're splaying either above or below, left and right of it, and you're adding value through the combos of those cards. Can't recommend that game highly enough. It's a really good game. One of the surprise for the convention for me was something I didn't know about going into it, and I only discovered when I was there. It's a game called Flip 7 by the Op. Have you guys heard of this game yet?
I've not.
So Flip 7 is a game that is so deceptively simple, and it's push your luck. Essentially, you're trying to flip over 7 different numbers, but you're doing it blackjack style. So we go around the table, everybody flips a card over. Let's just say I flip over 7, right? And then it goes to Matt, and he flips over a 2. Well, there's 2 2s in the deck. There are 7 7s in the deck. There are 12 12s in the deck. So the lower the number, the less chance of getting a repeat. But the higher the number, the higher chance, right? And what you're doing is you're trying to get a high score. But the instant you duplicate the number, you get nothing. So as it's going on the table, you're deciding to either take a hit or not as you go. So my first card's a 7, my second card's a 9, my third card's an 11. Uh-oh, that's a lot of big cards, right? Like, do I want to just take that score, that 7, 9, and 11, so 27? Or do I want to push my luck and try to get more things? And if you can manage to get 7 numbers, then you get an extra 15 points. The round ends immediately for everybody, and everybody scores what they have. So it's kind of like a push your luck element there. But on top of that, there are also little personality cards. So there's a card in there that says second chance. So if you get that card, you don't get a card that round, but it does give you an insurance for the next time you flip over another card that matches the other ones. So it kind of like helps out that way. Or you can flip 3 on somebody else. So you can get a card that says, I'm forcing Matt to flip 3 cards in a row. See if I can maybe force him to bust or something like that. It's the kind of game that anyone and everyone can play. And it's perfect for, the tiny little moments of we're waiting for people to show up, or, you're out to dinner and you're like, we're bored, nothing to talk about. Let's bring this game out and just flip a couple cards. And then, the drink showed up. Perfect. Sweep it all off the table. And we'll just get, on with the evening. But I really think this is one of those super accessible, super easy 5-minute teach games that everybody needs to have in their bag.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds like a great little filler. Yeah, small box. You can bring it wherever you want, right? It could be waiting for a flight or waiting for a meal. I mean,
yes,
those are good games to have in our collections. Fantastic.
There were also a couple of games that I didn't pick up. I think the Cascadia Roll and Rights are really cool games. Like, that's really awesome. I also checked out Harvest from Keymaster. That's a really cool looking game. Middle Ages caught my eye. It was really cool, but I didn't get a chance to grab a copy of that one or demo that one. But that one's one I'm looking forward to picking up.
Yeah, I actually had a chance. One of my friends picked up Middle Ages, and we played it in the JW Open Gaming area on one of the nights. And that's a really, really cool game, Middle Ages. You said you haven't had a chance to play. It has a little bit of a King Domino mechanism where there's like a huge like grid of like rows of tiles that you're going to put into your tableau,
right.
And then depending on the strength of the tile based on the number on the back of the tiles, if you draft a really strong tile, that means you're going to pick last on the next set of tiles. And if you then pick up the weakest tile on the earliest of that row, then you'll have the first shot at the next row, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, you're building up this little like tableau of tiles, that every different type of tableau or every different type of tile does a completely different thing that affects sometimes other tableaus or other tiles, they'll reference other tiles. So when you play a red tile, it'll say score a point for every green tile you have, and that kind of thing. So the other thing that's really neat about it is I believe it has some sort of mechanism, if I'm not mistaken, where at the end of the game you score your smallest section, so you have to try to somewhat build them up evenly. So that's kind of a neat mechanism too, where you can't just like try to monopolize one thing. You have to at least do a little bit of everything. Really neat game that's like King Domino. I want to say it's very similar to King Domino, but like the strategy and the heaviness of the game is multiplied probably by 5 or so. It's like, just King Domino if you really want something crunchier.
Yeah, that's that
Kinesia you mentioned
style
both
scoring.
King Domino and Cascadia. Yeah. Because you mentioned Cascadia is one of our favorites. It hits the table quite frequently. It's a good game where we teach friends who aren't into the hobby. And I remember last time I was playing it, unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize there were roll and write versions. This game would do well with a roll and write, much like King Domino. And sure enough, now they got multiple roll and writes. I think they got the rolling rivers and rolling hills, and yeah. So I'm intrigued to pick those up and give them a look. So yeah, for all our listeners,
the other one I was going to talk
take
about
notes.
was,
There's lots of hot games coming down the pipe.
The other one I was going to talk about was Tiernanog by Grand Gamers Guild. That is a game that was doing super awesome. They only had a couple of copies left to bring to Gencon because they had sold that many at Origins. But they have a new Kickstarter out to do the next batch. So I'm definitely going to be backing that one. That's a really awesome game. Tiernanog by Grand Gamers Guild.
Cool. Well,
I've had my eye on that one recently, and I've been flirting with that Kickstarter. I haven't pressed the button yet, but I just might.
As soon as we're done here, you're going to. I know, Matt. You're going to do it. As will many of our listeners, I'm sure. Amazing. So before we land the plane and wrap things up, maybe for some of those like me who are listening but have never attended a Gen Con, well, first of all, let me give you the dates for next year. They've already got the next 2-year dates now. So 2025 Gen Con will take place July 31st to August 3rd. At the Indiana Convention Center, Lucas Oil Stadium. So yeah, if you just go to gencon.com, you can get all the info there. But both for you, Matt, and maybe Andrew, for you, being the veteran, 5-time attendee, maybe 3 tips for first-time Gen Con attendees. That if you had to do it all again year 1, what would you advise to those newbies like myself and many others maybe who'll go for the first time, that they can go in with their eyes wide open and maximize their experience in year 1?
All right, so here's my tips. Number 1, get there early. I recommend either getting there first thing on Thursday, which is not my favorite thing to do, or get there Wednesday. And I think the reason why you want to get there Wednesday is, 1, you want to get acclimated. You want to like find your spots. You want to walk around a little bit. And there is plenty of gaming going on. It's just not official gaming, right? So one of the things about Indianapolis is it takes over the downtown. So every hotel has a lobby, and if it has tables, there are probably games on it. In fact, it's actually more difficult to find an open table than it is to find a game that you could just jump in on. So definitely show up early and just be open-minded. And I think one of the greatest parts about Gen Con is it's the culmination of all your people, right? So these are your people. These are friends you just don't know yet. So go ahead and be open, be willing, be trial friendly. Like, just go and be friendly and meet people. Like Matt said, just talk to the guy in line in front of you or behind you and stuff like that. I think that's where you'll be surprised at how many really awesome people you can pick up in your friendship circle. And if they're not local to you, then they become your kind of convention friends. There are people every year that I look forward to seeing that I only see at conventions, and that's so much fun. Another tip is don't go to bed early. It's tempting, I know, to just say, okay, I'm exhausted, my day is over, I'm going to just go lay down in my hotel room and watch TV for a couple hours and pass out. All the really cool stuff is happening randomly all over the city, and you don't get invitations to these things, but if you happen upon them, you get to be part of them. And I say this like, there are places that have exclusive, guest lists and stuff like that. Those are publishers who are wooing, tabletop content creator people, and they're having private parties and stuff like that. But there are all sorts of other events, just people who are having drinks and talking shop, your designers who are doing after hour exclusive playtests of this or playtests of that. Or, certain publishers also will rent out a ballroom and just show off their games. And you can walk in and be like, oh, look, I didn't know this was going on, but I can go demo a game that is not even for sale. This is going to come out next year or come out in the next 3 months or Kickstarter next month or whatever. And all these things are just happening. And if you are bored, just walk around and go looking. You'll be surprised at what you can stumble into by accident. It's such a cool thing that happens in that area that you don't have to be invited to experience.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Andrew. I want to go. I got to get my tickets for next year. Matt, so having experienced your first Gen Con, if you could go back in time and do it all again, what would you do different? What do you think? Yeah, I did that well. What would you want to adjust for year 2 from your perspective?
Yeah, a few things. One of the main things I think is get your accommodations and your plan set up super early. And super early is not like weeks ahead. We're talking months ahead. Everything books up. As Andrew said, like it takes over all of downtown. There are like 5-6 major hotels, within a block or 2 of the convention center. And all of those have their halls and their ballrooms and all that full of events as well. So like, again, 71,000 people went this year, right? That's not a small amount of people. That's half of my entire city So yeah, get your hotel early. I was late getting my hotel, and I had to scramble, and ended up sleeping on an air mattress on the floor with some of the Dragon Egg Games guys. But like, I got lucky because I was able to figure something out. But figure out your parking, your travel, your accommodations, all that stuff super early. You will not regret it, because if you try to do that late, like I know I was looking at some of the cost for hotels downtown, and it was, didn't even make sense. If I managed to book a hotel like 20-minute drive away, and it was not a nice hotel. So luckily I was able to cancel that and crash on an air mattress, which was much better. It was downtown and close by. And I would just say, like, all the standard convention stuff, like make sure you have a refillable water bottle, stay hydrated. Try to make sure you're fed, that you have, whether it's snacks or you have something set up where you can get some food in, because there was plenty of times where I like lost track of time, and all of a sudden I'm feeling like super unwell, and I'm like, oh man, I haven't eaten anything in like 6 hours. And so you definitely try to stay on top of your own health. It's easy to just, like, there's so much shiny things, it's so easy to just lose yourself. So that's the two big things for me, anyways, for our first time goer, is just like make sure you're taking care of yourself, and make sure that your accommodations and all your plans are set up super early, because otherwise it's either not going to happen, or you're going to spend way too much money.
I don't want to hammer on this too much, but also make sure you leave room for not plans, right? Like, plan things that you want to do. Absolutely. Find those booths that you want to go to and grab that game. But really be open to wandering. Really be open to new experiences that you cannot know exist ahead of time. Don't be afraid to block out a period of time to be bored. And I say that with air quotes because you won't be actually bored, but give yourself that room to explore and check out things that you weren't intending to check out. For instance, for those people who don't even know, the entire Indianapolis Colts stadium is open play. So you can literally go underneath into a tunnel, come up out of the tunnel into the stadium, go walk onto the turf that has, flooring or whatever not, but you can actually sit at the 50-yard line and play a game of Cascadia if you chose to do so, and go and explore those things. There are also different hotels that have breakout rooms in their little banquet areas that are nothing but RPGs. There's just people in there, some of them cosplay, some of them not, that are literally playing 6 and 7 hour RPGs, just rolling dice and doing math, and they're having the time of their lives, and it's 4 blocks away from all the action. You have no idea how many people are doing cool stuff that you just don't even know and can't see.
Right. No, that's good advice. I'm just picturing this, because I've been to that stadium. I've been to an Indianapolis Colts football game. So I'm just trying to envision that many fans for a football game just descending on the stadium for the board game hobby. It's pretty incredible. And that's good advice not only for Gen Con, that's good advice for life. Leave some blocks open just to explore, to live, have fun, be curious. So, hey, sometimes the board game hobby bleeds into real life as well. So, amazing. Awesome. Matt,
yeah, one last thing I want to...
Sure.
Yeah, one last thing I want to say before we wrap this up is, like, this is apparent to me prior to Gen Con, but having gone to this massive convention with so many people, it is way more front and center. What I'm getting to is how amazingly accepting and inclusive and the culture of this hobby is amazing. Like, you've seen people from every walks of life. It doesn't matter what your background is and where you're from and what your sexual orientation is, or, your gender identification, all of these things. Everybody is an ally in the board game industry. And those who aren't, they're the outsiders. They're the people who feel out of place. It's not a welcoming place for people who are not welcoming. And I think it's been more apparent to me in a convention like Gen Con, because there's just so many people that were just so amazing. And anyways, I just wanted to kind of mention that. It's just like, it's something that I've always known about the industry, because board gamers come from originally outsiders from in their parents' basements, and it has evolved way more into obviously the mainstream, and it's way more accepted and that kind of thing today. But those are kind of the origins of the tabletop industry, and I think that's why we're so accepting is for that reason. The origins of where we all came from, or the people who have kind of laid the ground ahead of us, or beat those trails ahead of us, to kind of be able to do everything that we're doing today with the hobby and how it's so mainstream. So anyways, I just wanted to mention that because it's way more apparent having gone to a massive convention like that. And I just I find that it's an amazing thing, an amazing culture to be part of.
Agreed.
Absolutely. There's great pride in seeing that culture and that experience. And yeah, in my vocational world, I'm a member of the clergy, and at our church space, we run a board game cafe. And for us lately, it's been, let's just get people around tables, whether we're sharing a meal together, playing games together, having life-giving conversation together. That's where the magic happens. And that's the beauty of the hobby, right? Just meeting people, having some shared experiences and doing life together where everyone's welcome at the table. So Matt, Andrew, thanks for joining me at the table today to have this fantastic Gencon conversation. Glad you had a blast. Hopefully I'll get to experience it maybe as early as next year. And thanks to all our listeners today at Dice Camera Action for pulling up a chair at the table today and sitting in on this conversation. Hopefully this episode doesn't cost you too much money. I'm sure you've all got long lists of hot games you want to pick up now. So hope you enjoy those purchases. We are not responsible for any financial debt incurred as a result of listening to Dice Camera Action. But thanks to all our listeners. Andrew, thanks again for being a special guest. And for sure, we'll want to have you on again if you'd be willing to come back down the road, because viticulture is one of my favorites. So maybe we can have that conversation and talk about the wonderful world of wine and gaming together and find a good movie to pair that with, as we do here on the podcast. So for all our listeners, if you're enjoying this podcast, hey, please take a few minutes to rate us and review us on whatever platform you're listening on. You can follow us on Instagram at Dice Camera Action Pod. And if you have any feedback, comments, or would like to suggest a movie game pairing for a future episode, please shoot us an email anytime. We love the feedback from our community, all of our listeners. So send us an email at dicecameraactionpod@gmail.com. So on behalf of me, Jason Tripp, thanks to Matt and thanks to Andrew for all your wealth of wisdom and experiences from Gen Con. And hopefully we'll see you all there at Gen Con 2025. In the meantime, enjoy your time gaming. This is Dice Camera Action signing off.